The cop didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask Steven Seagal where he was coming from. He didn't even explain what the problem was. He just grabbed Steven's arm, slammed him against the hood of the car, and snapped the handcuffs shut. "You think you can just walk away?" the officer barked. "You people always think you're above the law." The metallic click of the cuffs echoed louder than the traffic. People on the sidewalk froze. A couple walking their dog stopped. A food vendor slowly lowered his spatula. Phones came out. Because everyone knew something about this felt wrong. Steven didn't resist. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry. Instead, he looked calm, almost disappointed. "Officer," Steven said quietly, "this isn't necessary." The cop laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Now you want to talk polite, too late for that." He tightened the cuffs for no reason at all. Steven winced, but stayed silent. That silence annoyed the officer even more. "You think staying quiet makes you important?" the cop sneered. "I've arrested guys like you before." Steven slowly lifted his eyes and looked straight at him. Not scared, not angry, just steady, powerful. A woman filming whispered. "He doesn't look like a criminal," another man muttered. "This is going to end badly for someone." The officer pushed Steven toward the patrol car. "Get in." Steven paused for a moment and calmly said, "Before you do this, you should check who you're arresting." The cop rolled his eyes. Everyone suddenly becomes somebody important. Then he leaned closer and said something that made the crowd tense. "In my city, I decide who matters." That was the moment the officer crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Because what he didn't know, what no one on that street knew yet, was that the man standing in handcuffs surrounded by flashing lights and curious stares wasn't just another citizen. He wasn't a suspect. He wasn't powerless. Steven Seagal was the mayor of the city, and in a few minutes, when the truth came out, the officer's confidence would disappear. His face would turn pale, and this wrongful arrest would change everything. This wasn't just a mistake. It was the beginning of a public reckoning. It was early evening, the kind of hour when the city felt half-fey rushed and half-fey relaxed. Office workers were spilling out of glass buildings, loosening ties, checking their phones, thinking about dinner. Cars crawled through traffic, horns blaring in short, impatient bursts. Streetlights hadn't fully come on yet, but the sky was already fading into that dull orange glow that made everything look tired. Officer Daniels loved this time of day. To him, this was when authority mattered most. He stood near his patrol car, adjusting his belt, scanning faces like a hunter, scanning a field. Badge polished, uniform crisp, chest out. He believed the badge didn't just give him responsibility, it gave him importance. In his mind, order existed because people like him enforced it, and people like them disrupted it. Daniels had built a habit over the years. He judged quickly. Clothes first, posture second, confidence last. Anyone who didn't look like they belonged immediately became suspicious. That's when he noticed Steven Seagal. Steven was walking alone along the sidewalk, unhurried, hands relaxed by his sides. No suit, no security detail, no expensive watch flashing in the sun. Just plain clothes and a calm presence that didn't beg for attention. To most people, he looked like just another man heading home. To Officer Daniels, he looked like a problem. Daniels narrowed his eyes. "Unbelievable," he muttered to himself. "Always the same type." He stepped away from his car and raised his voice. "Hey, you there, stop." Steven paused and turned calmly. "Yes, officer?" he asked. Daniels walked closer, circling him slightly, scanning him from head to toe. The look wasn't professional, it was judgmental. "Where you coming from?" Daniels demanded. Steven answered politely, "From a meeting." Daniels snorted. "Yeah, and where exactly was that?" Steven didn't flinch. "City Hall." That answer should have ended everything. Instead, it triggered something else. Mockery. Daniels laughed loudly. "City Hall? You expect me to believe that?" A couple of pedestrians slowed down, sensing tension. One man frowned. A woman stopped tying her shoe just to listen. Steven stayed calm. "I'm not here to argue," That calm made Daniels uncomfortable. "You don't decide that," Daniels snapped. "I do." He stepped closer, invading Stephen's space. Stephen reached slowly into his pocket. Before he could pull anything out, Daniels raised a hand. "Don't make any sudden moves." Stephen sighed quietly, not in fear, but in frustration. "You stopped me without cause," Stephen said evenly. "At least explain why." Daniels' jaw tightened. "You match the description of a suspect," he said. "What description?" Stephen asked. Daniels hesitated for half a second, just enough for the people watching to notice. "That's not your concern." The crowd began to whisper. "That's not how it works. He hasn't done anything." Daniels felt eyes on him now. And he hated that. Authority to him was about control, and control meant never admitting doubt. Stephen stood there, calm and steady, hands visible, posture relaxed. He wasn't acting nervous, he wasn't aggressive, he wasn't resisting, and that made Daniels feel challenged. "You think you're smarter than me," Daniels snapped. "You think because you talk calmly you're special?" Stephen met his eyes. "No," he said, "I think everyone deserves respect." That single sentence hit Daniels harder than an insult. Respect. From him, Daniels' ego flared. "You don't tell me how to do my job," he said sharply. "In this city, when I say stop, you stop. When I say answer, you answer." Stephen nodded slowly. "Power without fairness isn't law," he replied. "It's abuse." That was the moment Daniels decided this wasn't about procedure anymore. This was about dominance. He reached for Stephen's arm. The watching crowd stiffened. A man whispered, "This is about to go bad," and with that one assumption, made without evidence, without cause, without humanity, the situation crossed from a simple stop into something that would soon shock the entire city. The moment Officer Daniels grabbed Stephen's arm, the energy on the street changed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was tense. People stopped pretending they weren't watching. Conversations died mid-sentence. A car slowed almost to a stop, its driver leaning forward to see what was happening. "Hey, there's no reason for that," someone muttered from the sidewalk. Daniels ignored them. He tightened his grip, twisting Stephen slightly toward the patrol car. "Hands where I can see them," Daniels ordered. Though Stephen's hands had never left plain sight, Stephen didn't pull away. He didn't flinch. He simply looked at the officer and said calmly, "Touching me without cause is a mistake." That calm tone, measured steady, felt like an insult to Daniels. "A mistake?" Daniels snapped. "You're already making plenty of those." He shoved Stephen harder against the car. The dull thud of Stephen's shoulder hitting metal echoed louder than it should have. A woman gasped. "Sir, I'm cooperating," Stephen said quietly. "There's no need for force." Daniels laughed, a short, ugly sound. "Everyone cooperates after they get caught." "Caught for what?" Stephen asked. Daniels hesitated again. For just a second, there was nothing. No charge, no explanation, no justification. So he filled the silence with anger. "You're being detained for questioning," he said sharply. "And if you keep talking, I'll add resisting." That word, resisting, made the crowd uneasy. "That's not fair," someone said louder now. Daniels spun around. "Back up, this doesn't concern you." But it did concern them. Because Stephen wasn't fighting. He wasn't threatening. He wasn't running. He was standing there, calm, controlled, dignified. And yet, he was being treated like a criminal. Daniels pushed Stephen's arm behind his back. "Officer," Stephen said evenly. "This situation is being recorded." Daniels glanced around and noticed the phones. 3, 4, maybe more. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed his face, then his pride kicked in. "Good," he said. "Let them record." He pulled out the handcuffs. Metal glinted in the fading light click. The sound cut through the air like a gunshot. Stephen closed his eyes for a second, not in fear, but in restraint. "You're escalating something that doesn't need to exist," Stephen said calmly. Daniels leaned close to his ear. "You don't tell me what exists." He tightened the cuffs unnecessarily. Stephen inhaled sharply. A man in the crowd shouted, "Hey, that's too tight!" Daniels ignored him. You like acting important, Daniels said. Let's see how important you feel in the back of my car. Stephen finally spoke louder, not angry, but firm. Call your supervisor. The street went silent. Daniels froze for half a second, then scoffed. Everyone suddenly wants a supervisor. Yes, Stephen replied, because this is exactly why they exist. That sentence struck something deep. Daniels' face hardened. You don't give orders here, he said coldly. I do. He guided Stephen toward the patrol car, opening the back door with force. As Stephen stepped forward, he turned his head slightly and addressed the people watching. Please, he said calmly. Remember what you're seeing. Those words sent a ripple through the crowd. This wasn't about one man anymore. It was about power. Unchecked, unquestioned, unaccountable. Daniels slammed the door shut. The lock clicked. Inside the car, Stephen sat upright, calm as ever, looking straight ahead. Outside, Daniels adjusted his uniform, breathing heavier now. He thought he had control. What he didn't realize was that every second of this arrest was digging a deeper hole, and when the truth came out, that badge wouldn't protect him, it would expose him. The moment the patrol car door slammed shut, the street fell into an uneasy silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, where everyone feels something is wrong, but no one is sure how far to step in. Stephen sat in the back seat, hands cuffed in front of him, posture straight, eyes calm. The red and blue lights reflected across the window, washing his face in slow, repeating flashes. He looked neither afraid nor defeated. He looked patient. Outside, Officer Daniels paced for a moment, jaw tight, trying to regain the confidence he'd lost the instant. The crowd stopped backing away. People were still filming. A young woman held her phone steady, whispering to herself, "This doesn't feel right." An older man shook his head. "I've seen this before," he muttered. "Never ends well." Daniels noticed them now, the watching eyes, the judging silence. "Move along," he barked. "Show's over." No one moved. That irritated him more than shouting ever could. He turned his back to the crowd and spoke into his radio. "Dispatch. I have one male in custody. Possible match to earlier description." There it was again, possible, vague, empty, convenient. From inside the car, Stephen spoke clearly through the open window. "Officer," he said, "you still haven't explained what law I've broken." Daniels froze, slowly. He turned back. "I told you," he said sharply. "You fit the description." Stephen met his eyes. "Then name it." The crowd leaned in. Daniels opened his mouth, then closed it. Silence answered for him. A woman near the curb finally spoke up. "He hasn't done anything wrong," Daniels snapped. "Ma'am, step back." Stephen's voice remained calm. "This is exactly how trust breaks," he said, not loudly, but quietly. Those words landed harder than shouting ever could. The people watching weren't just seeing an arrest anymore. They were seeing a test of power, a test of fairness, a test of character. Daniels turned away again, pretending not to hear, pretending not to feel the weight of the moment. He adjusted his cap, straightened his vest, and paced beside the patrol car. But his movements were no longer confident. They were restless. A teenage boy whispered, "Why is he so calm?" His friend replied, "Because he knows something we don't." Daniels checked his watch. Seconds stretched. Inside the car, Stephen closed his eyes briefly, breathing slow and steady. He wasn't thinking about the cuffs. He wasn't thinking about humiliation. He was thinking about what this moment represented. Not just for him, but for everyone watching. He leaned forward slightly and said, "Officer Daniels." Daniels stiffened. "How do you know my name?" he snapped. "Because accountability begins with names," he replied. The crowd murmured. Daniels' hand tightened into a fist. "Ina," he said, "you've said enough." "No," Stephen replied gently. "You've heard enough." That sentence unsettled him more than anger ever could. Daniels turned to his radio again, voice tighter now. "Supervisor requested," he said, forcing the words out. The crowd exchanged looks. That was new. That meant something had changed. A woman whispered, "Why would he call a supervisor if this was normal?" Exactly, minutes passed. The city noise slowly returned, cars moving, horns honking. But the tension remained like a cloud hanging low over the street. Stephen watched everything from behind the glass. The people, the fear, the doubt, and the officer. Standing outside, suddenly unsure. A siren sounded in the distance. Another patrol car approached. Daniels straightened instantly, trying to recover his authority. But something had already shifted. The balance. The truth was close now. Very close, and when it arrived, it wouldn't need shouting. It would speak for itself. The approaching siren grew louder. Not urgent, not frantic. Just steady, like something inevitable. Heads turned as a black unmarked vehicle followed the patrol car onto the street. It wasn't flashy, but it carried a quiet weight. The kind of presence that didn't need lights to command attention. Officer Daniels noticed it immediately. His posture stiffened. The patrol car door opened, and a senior supervisor stepped out. His expression tight, eyes already scanning the scene. "Officer Daniels," he said, voice low but serious. Daniels snapped to attention. "Sir," before the supervisor could speak again. The door of the black car opened. Stephen stepped out of the patrol car slowly, cuffs still on, calm as ever. The supervisor's eyes widened, then he froze. For a split second, his face drained of color. He walked forward quickly. "Mr. Mayor," he said, almost under his breath. The street went silent. Phones trembled in hands. "Mayor," someone whispered. Another voice, louder this time. "Did he say mayor?" Officer Daniels turned sharply. "What?" he said. "Sir, there must be some mistake." The supervisor didn't look at him. He focused entirely on Stephen. "We're deeply sorry for this," he said. "There's been a serious misunderstanding." Stephen nodded once. "A misunderstanding caused by assumption," he replied calmly. The supervisor turned to Daniels now. "Remove the cuffs," he ordered. Daniels' hand shook. "Sir, I didn't know who he was." "That's not the point." The supervisor cut in. The metal cuffs came off. The sound felt heavier than when they'd gone on. The crowd erupted in whispers. "That's the mayor. No way." He didn't even argue. Stephen rubbed his wrists lightly, then looked at Daniels. Not with anger, not with revenge, with disappointment. "You never asked who I was," Stephen said quietly. "You never asked what I was doing. You decided before you listened." Daniels swallowed hard. "I was just doing my job," he muttered. Stephen's gaze didn't waver. "No," he replied. "You were doing what felt easy." The supervisor stepped back, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Mayor," he said, "this will be handled internally. We assure you." Stephen raised a hand gently. "No," he said. "It will be handled publicly." That sentence sent a shock through the air. Daniel's face went pale. The crowd leaned in. Stephen turned to the people filming. "Please don't stop recording," he said calmly. "Transparency matters." Then he turned back to Daniels. "You used authority without responsibility," Stephen continued. "And if this can happen to me, it happens every day to people with far less power." The street felt different now. The tension had shifted from fear to realization. Daniel struggled to speak. I didn't mean," Stephen interrupted him gently. "Intent doesn't erase impact." The supervisor nodded slowly, knowing the weight of what was happening. Stephen took a step forward. "This badge," he said, gesturing to Daniel's chest, "isn't a weapon, it's a promise." Daniels couldn't meet his eyes. The crowd was no longer just watching. They were witnessing. A woman whispered, "I'm glad this was him. Imagine if it wasn't." Stephen heard that. He turned toward her and nodded. "That's exactly the point." He looked back at Daniels one last time. "Leadership isn't proven when you feel powerful," he said. "It's proven when you're challenged." The supervisor cleared his throat. "Mr. Mayor, would you like to continue this conversation somewhere private?" Stephen shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "This started in public. It ends in public." The lesson had been delivered. The truth was out. And nothing on that street would ever look the same again. The street didn't erupt in cheers. It didn't explode into chaos. Instead, it settled into something heavier. understanding. Officer Daniels stood frozen, shoulders stiff, badge suddenly feeling heavier than it ever had before. The authority he once wore so comfortably now felt exposed, stripped bare by the truth standing calmly in front of him. Steven Seagal adjusted his sleeve slowly, deliberately, no rush, no anger, no victory pose, just control. The supervisor cleared his throat, trying to regain order. "Officer Daniels," he said firmly, "you are being placed on immediate administrative leave." Daniels' head snapped up, "Sir." "Effective now," the supervisor continued. "Turn in your badge and service weapon." A sharp breath rippled through the crowd. Daniels' hands trembled as he unclipped the badge from his uniform. The metal that once symbolized power now looked small in his palm. He placed it in the supervisor's hand. Steven watched silently. This wasn't about punishment. It was about accountability. Daniels swallowed hard. "I was under pressure," he said quietly. "I didn't mean for this to..." Steven met his eyes. "Pressure reveals character," he said. "It doesn't create it." The supervisor turned to Steven. "Mr. Mayor, we will launch a full investigation. Body cam footage, witness statements, everything." Steven nodded. "That's exactly what should happen," he replied. "For me, and for everyone else you stop." He turned to the people still recording. "This officer will receive due process," Steven said calmly, "because justice doesn't mean revenge." That surprised some people, but it shouldn't have. Daniels lowered his head, ashamed. A young officer standing nearby shifted uncomfortably. Steven noticed. He turned toward the group of officers. "This isn't about one man," he said. "It's about a system that allows assumptions to replace judgment." The supervisor nodded slowly. "We'll review training procedures," he said, "immediately." Steven looked back at Daniels. "You had a choice tonight," he said. "You chose authority over humanity." Daniels's voice cracked. "I didn't know who you were," Steven replied evenly. "You shouldn't need to." Those words cut deeper than shouting ever could. The supervisor gestured toward the patrol car. "Sir, would you like a ride?" "I'd rather walk," he said. That choice said everything. As Steven stepped away from the patrol car, the crowd parted naturally, creating a quiet path. People looked at him differently now. Not because he was the mayor, but because of how he handled power when it was taken from him. A woman spoke softly.
"Thank you." Steven stopped and turned.
"For what?" he asked. "For showing how it should be handled," she replied. He nodded once. "That's the job," he said. Behind him, Daniels was escorted toward another vehicle. No cuffs this time, just consequences. The supervisor addressed the crowd. "This incident will be reviewed publicly," he said. "We appreciate your patience." Steven paused at the edge of the sidewalk and turned back one final time. "This city belongs to its people," he said clearly. "Not to fear, not to ego, not to unchecked power." The crowd listened. "This isn't the end of a mistake," Steven continued. "It's the beginning of correction." He took a breath. And correction only works when we're willing to look at ourselves honestly. With that, Steven walked away. Slow, steady, unescorted. Not as a man who had just been wronged, but as a leader who had just reminded everyone what justice is supposed to look like. By the time Steven Seagal disappeared down the sidewalk, the street no longer felt like the same place. What had started as an ordinary evening had turned into a mirror, one held up to power, authority, and the quiet assumptions people make every day. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but the conversation didn't end. It spread. Phones buzzed as videos were uploaded, captions written, comments pouring in within minutes. This could have been anyone. He stayed calm the entire time. If this can happen to the mayor, imagine everyone else. And that was the point. This wasn't a story about a famous name or a powerful title. It was about how easily authority can slip into arrogance when it's no longer questioned. Steven's words echoed in people's minds. You shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them right. That single sentence carried more weight than the handcuffs ever did. Power doesn't reveal itself when everything goes smoothly. It reveals itself in moments of discomfort, in moments of doubt, in moments where a choice must be made between control and compassion. Officer Daniels had made his choice, and the consequences were real. But Stephen had made his choice too. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't demand special treatment. He let the system expose itself. That calm restraint sent a stronger message than anger ever could, because real leadership doesn't need to prove itself. It listens. It observes. It corrects. Later that night, a short statement was released from City Hall. No one is above the law, and no one is beneath respect. Accountability applies to all. Those words spread faster than the video. They were shared, quoted, debated. Some people defended the officer, some demanded harsher punishment. But the most important conversation wasn't about blame. It was about change, about training that values judgment over assumption, about policing that protects dignity, not ego, about communities that feel safe being seen, not targeted. The lesson was simple but uncomfortable. If we excuse abuse of power when it's convenient, we normalize it when it's harmful. And silence doesn't protect justice. It protects wrongdoing. Stephen never mentioned the incident again in interviews. He didn't use it for praise or politics, because the moment wasn't about him. It was about the thousands of people who saw themselves in that patrol car window. People who had been stopped, questioned, judged, and told, without words, that they mattered less. That night reminded everyone of something easy to forget. Respect is not earned by title. It is owed by default. A badge is not a license to humiliate. A uniform is not permission to assume, and leadership is not how loudly you command. It's how fairly you serve. If this story made you think, if it made you uncomfortable, if it made you reflect, then it did its job. Type justice if you believe the law should protect, not intimidate. Tell us where you're watching from. Your voice matters. Because change doesn't start in silence. It starts when people pay attention.